Pain heals. Chicks dig scars. Glory lasts forever.
Welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for your support. Hope you're having a fantastic day. Shout out to the 19, which is all of you and is growing as we're actually moving into another WNBA season. Thank you all for smashing the like button on these last few videos. They're getting out there a little more, so we've got new people coming in. Thank you for giving the channel a chance. We're actually under 100 away from 12,000, which was the goal before the first game. But now I'm going to get greedy. 13,000? Can we get 13,000 by the start of the season? It is possible, but of course, I'd love to get to 12. But so thank you all for your support. I really do appreciate it. We got to talk a little bit about Sheryl Swoopes. Oops, she's at it again. Sheryl the doorknob Swoopes, as you can see here, criticizes decisions by Caitlin Clark's Fever coach. Yes, we will get into that in a little bit as well. But I got some stuff to play for you. This is from the uh, the new podcast, the rebranded podcast, of which she's not named as a co-host, but of course she seems to be coming on as a guest a lot. WNBA, we see you. So, and yes, this is the lady who has no idea what she was talking about from Bleacher Report, where she's saying Paige Beckers led the nation in assists with barely over 4, and then the year before it was George A. Moore who led the nation, even though it was actually Caitlin Clark. So yes, we're getting quality stuff, folks. This is the high level of quality that we get from sports media. This is why the little peons like myself must be kept off of these platforms, because we just cannot compete with this level of quality. So let's dig in. They're talking about the preseason and how Stephanie White handled her roster and the minutes that they got on during these games. So here we go.
Fact that we're talking about preseason games and how we got to watch all of them, and they were good games. Preseason games, we're trying to make final roster cuts. Each team is trying to figure out who are our people. So sometimes if you're new to the league and you're watching and you're like, oh, why aren't the stars playing towards the end of an overtime game? That's because the coach want to see what the rookies do, what newcomers do in these tight situations, and how they kind of figure out their role without the stars on the floor, and to see if they're going to make the team. Like, that's what this really was about. I wanted to ask you, though, when it is a preseason game and there are blowouts and there's rotations and all of these things, what things can we actually take seriously from a preseason game, and what things can we ignore and just be like, okay, not yet. This is just the first game.
Okay, well, let's talk about that meandering question first. The premise is wrong. The way she's coming at it is wrong. To say that the preseason is about these new players and seeing who makes it is a very, very limited view of what it's about in any sport. Is that part of it? Yes. For some teams might already know. They might have extra players in camp because they have those players to be there and help out in terms of the training camp and everything, but they have no intention of ever offering them a contract or putting them on the roster. But there are multiple things involved in what a team is looking at for the preseason going into the season. So the premise is wrong to say that the preseason is about these new players at the bottom of the roster. Not true. Yes, it can be a part, and the degree of which it matters is going to be different for every team, which I'm going to get into a little more because I want to hear Sheryl Swoopes talk first, and then we'll get into the comments made by her. And I'm sorry, I can't help but laugh. Anyway, let's go. Here we go.
Uh, okay, so what I thought preseason games were for, part of me was like, okay, example, the Washington Mystics Indiana Fever game. Because I know on social media, people were like, well, why aren't the starters in for the Mystics? They could win this game. And I was there, right?
No one who is an actual basketball fan was thinking that. Maybe the old guard WNBA fans were thinking that because they're not actually basketball fans, but no actual basketball fans were thinking that because, again, it's the preseason.
Because preseason is about, yes, you're going to play your starters, you're going to play your players. Typically, they don't even play that many minutes, right? Because
Mhm.
you have so many players on your roster that you got to make roster cuts. So you're still trying to figure out who can fit what we're doing. You're also experimenting with different lineups, with different players in the game. So I totally understood why Washington did what they did. I
Right.
was shocked we went to overtime, but anyway.
I
But
know.
I did have a question though with Indiana, right? Because even though the starters weren't in, like Sophie Cunningham and Lexi Hull they've been in the league for a while. You
Mhm.
actually had players who, like Bree Hall. Why wasn't she in that game per se? If you're still trying to figure out who's going to make the team, who you're going to cut. So I was a little confused with what Steph was doing, but anyway, it is what it is.
Sheryl Swoopes, a little confused. Well, hell, I'm done. That about sums up everything. But again, this is Cheryl with her nonsense about the Indiana Fever and framing it the wrong way. They're making serious assumptions based on what they want so she can be critical of the Indiana Fever. And so I'm going to go into a little more detail about what I'm saying. When you have the preseason, here's what it's about. Finalizing your roster. So if you have new players that you're unsure of, yes, you're going to give them a look. Finding your rotations. And then you may also have the added elements that the Fever have specifically. There's been a lot of turnover in the league, but probably so much for the Fever. Now they have 5 players returning, right? So it's a serious turnover of the roster, right? Dewana Bonner, Natasha Howard, Sophie Cunningham, Brianna Turner, Sydney Colson, right? All these new players in there. Then you're gonna have a completely new offensive and defensive system that's going to be installed because you also have a brand new coach. That's a lot. In the WNBA preseason and training camp, probably the shortest of any professional league in the major sports that I can think of. So you don't have a lot of time, you don't have a lot of opportunity to do all of this. Now, in everything I'm seeing with the Fever, and we've talked about this previously about what we think the roster is going to be, and it most likely is going to be what I've said, and again, not just me, a lot of people, which is why I think who think Stephanie White needs to make these games all about the bottom of the roster to figure it out is ridiculous. And it makes me question Sheryl Swoopes' basketball knowledge, which again goes back to the fact that it's about Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Fever. I promise you. Now, if someone's surprised in training camp to such a degree, Stephanie might get them more time in these games. But I think Stephanie White was 99.9% sure of what her roster was going to look like after the draft. So what then made sense for the Indiana Fever? With everything new going on, it made sense to play the players that were going to be a huge part of the season together as much as possible without, of course, injury risk and all of that. And you had your older players like Natasha Howard and Dewana Bonner playing a little less. It made sense. And then even Sophie Cunningham and Lexi Hull, she talks about how much they play because she signaled out the Mystics game, conveniently not talking about Brazil, where Sophie and Lexi played 11 minutes and 10 minutes. So here's the thing. What does it matter if they play 30 minutes and 10 minutes or they play 20 and 20, right? Which is what a lot of teams have done with their starters. They all play about half the game. I think the Fever starters averaged under 18 minutes per player in the Brazil game, right? Aaliyah Boston had the most minutes out of the starters. She played exactly 20. Okay, that I think that the starters averaged 17.6. It was about the same of the Chicago Sky because people were asking me, there were people putting out there, oh, the Fever left all their starters in to run it up against Brazil, and Chicago Sky didn't do that. The Fever starters played less than 18 minutes. Uh, so they had more of that. So my guess is that Stephanie White, and especially without Caitlin Clark, she wanted to see a lot of the players that are going to play big roles. She wanted to see them play together against a WNBA team, get them ready, get them running the offense that she wanted, see what the defense looked like, that so then they could have stuff to work on before the game, because they had all these other things that for the Fever were obvious to anyone, but were way more important than the bottom of the roster. Stephanie White already knew what her roster was going to be. Yes, there may be other teams like Washington who had what, three of the first 5 picks or 3 of the first 6 picks in the WNBA draft, right? So they got a bunch of rookies and all. They're a young team. They've got a bunch of rookies. So they're trying to figure out, yeah, are these rookies going to make the team? How much you know, are they going to be a part of it? I think Sonia Absolute Citron started both their preseason games. It makes a lot of sense. Every team is different. So coming from this idea of, well, the preseason is about playing the players who aren't going to be on the team. No, it isn't. I think we have a little bit more from Sheryl that I wanted to play because there's another important point I wanted to make. Then I will wrap it up and let y'all get about your day.
But to me, when I think about preseason, it really isn't so much for your players that are returning, the players that are going to make the team, but it's more about, I'm not sure about this particular player. Let me get her in a real life game situation and see how she handles that. But I'm also going to probably play her a few minutes with my starters, right? To see how that looks, how that works. Example, and I know we'll get to it.
All right, real quick before example. Sorry, I jumped the gun. I should have played this little extra bit right here. So, in response to that, everything I just said before, right? She knew, and again, they all did play with starters, right? Jim, even Bree Hall in the Brazilian game. Obviously, Michaela Timpson played with the starters as well. And again, I think Stephanie knew who her players were going to be, and I think getting some of these players like Jim and Hall into the game against Brazil was more for other teams to take a look at them, because Stephanie knew that they were not making this roster.
Like Nye with Vegas.
Oh my God.
If she doesn't make this squad, Becky Hammond. Right? Like, you put her in and she's playing with Asia, with Chelsea, with Jewel, because in my mind, Becky's like, I really think this kid's gonna be on this team. Let me see what she looks like with my big dogs. And listen, that kid can go. But to me, I wouldn't read too much into preseason though.
Okay, so that was the last little bit, and she made an interesting point, although that refutes everything she said before. I don't know if she realizes that. When she said about, oh, Becky Hammond's, this is someone who's going to make the team, so I want to see. Yeah, okay, there you go. Michaela Timpson played with starters. Again, I think they all did. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm thinking, I know, I think Michaela Timpson actually scored off an inbound pass from Caitlin Clark. Jim had a nice baseline backdoor and made a nice layup off a pass from Caitlin Clark. I know Bree Hall was in with Caitlin Clark because everyone's showing that photo of her all over the place with the expression on her face when Caitlin Clark took the shot from what is it? No. Anyway, she's I just completely blanked on where the Indianapolis Colts played, but that's where Caitlin Clark took her 3 from. But I'm going to leave it there. I just wanted to run through this. I thought it would be kind of fun to hear from Sheryl. We haven't heard from her in a while, and kind of explain, for those of you that maybe did see this or you've heard this from other people, kind of explain why this isn't necessarily true in how they're trying to frame the preseason. And I have no problem with how Stephanie White has handled the preseason games and what she's looking at. Every team has different things that they've got to emphasize in preseason. So I'm going to leave it there. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I think it was good to see our friend Sheryl again. By the way, I also find it funny that she's criticizing a successful WNBA coach when she got fired from, it was Loyola, right? In Chicago, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, for, let's just say, allegations of widespread abuse of her players is why Sheryl Swoopes lost her coaching job. So I don't know that she's the best person to be criticizing coaches, or why she's even on here, but I'm going to let that go for now. Smash the like button, subscribe to the channel. I really do appreciate it. Thank you so much. and I will talk to you later. Go have the day you deserve.